about where we are as a state, how we got here, and what it would take to move forward differently. These aren't political questions, they are learning questions. Changemakers was built on a simple idea. If we learn together, we can make positive change together. And that's exactly what we're here to continue doing today. So thank you all so much for being here. For those who may be unfamiliar with Changemakers, over the past 5 years, we brought together leaders from across sectors, business, education, healthcare, nonprofits, to better understand our education system here in New Mexico. We are a politically diverse group with Republicans, Democrats, and Independents represented. We don't agree on everything, but we do agree on this. When it comes to education, the first priority must be improving outcomes for our kids. And we are committed to making sure New Mexico stays focused on that goal. As of this May, we will have more than 100 graduates of the program. Our alumni represent a wide range of organizations across the state, reflecting the breadth and diversity of our community. This is truly a cross-sector effort because improving outcomes for students in New Mexico will take all of us. We would like to thank the following for being with us this morning: the APS Superintendent, Gabriela Blakely, APS board members Joshua Martinez and Courtney Jackson, and several New Mexico legislative district aides. Let's give them a round of applause. We would also like to thank the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association and Floor Coverings International for their sponsorship of today's event. Welcome, round of applause.
Good morning, my name is Jamie Gonzalez, and I'm a part of Cohort 5 of New Mexico Changemakers. Last year, Changemakers Alumni launched the Spark Change Awards to honor schools that are showing what's possible when it comes to improving student outcomes for all students. These awards were created to recognize schools that are either the highest performing or fastest improving in literacy and math for students included in the Yazzie Martinez subgroups. This includes economically disadvantaged students, English learners, Native American students, and students with disabilities. At the core, these awards are about celebrating progress and demonstrating that meaningful improvements is possible for every student in New Mexico. Let's take a moment to recognize and celebrate these outstanding schools and educators for their impact and commitment to student success. And now let's turn to today's conversation. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Michael Pfefferman, Changemakers Cohort 2.
Hello, everybody. How are you today? What's the right place for this month? Here? Is it here? I'll get it figured out. It is nice to see everybody. I am Michael Pfefferman, as Jade mentioned. I'm a graduate of Cohort 2 of the Changemakers program. I'm also the owner of Floor Coverings International here in town, and also a graduate of Albuquerque High School, APS all the way through. So, go Bulldogs. Before we get started, I want to note, and I think this will come up on a slide here, we have social channels, and if you hear something today that you think is important and worth the rest of the community understanding, we encourage you and appreciate you posting that on your social channel of choice and using this hashtag Progress is Possible New Mexico. So now that we have celebrated the Spark Change Award winners, which by the way included schools that improved proficiency rates year over year up to 40% from the year before, and achieved proficiency levels of up to 80% proficiency in their schools, which is very high. We have a 20% average proficiency rate about for math and reading in 4th grade. So now that we recognize that, let's hear from our panelists who have, they're leaders who are not just part of that story, but they're driving measurable results for students here in our state and have been doing so for years. So please join me in welcoming one by one. And first we'll start with Jade Rivera. Jade, come on up. Jade is the primary executive director of the Albuquerque Collegiate Charter School. And also hot off the presses, I understand that she just been named the new executive director of Public Charter Schools in Mexico. Our next panelist is Matthew Montaño. Matthew's the superintendent of Bernalillo Public School System, and he also served as a teacher and a principal in that system, as well as Deputy Secretary for Teaching and Learning in New Mexico. Kimberly Finke, come on and join us. Kimberly's the principal at Seattle High School currently and has led 4 different school turnarounds, including stops in Gallup and Corrales here in New Mexico. And then finally, we have with us Benjamin Barlow. Ben, come on up. So Ben is a transplant we're very grateful to have from Mississippi. He's now the principal here at North Star Elementary School and has spent 26 years in education as a teacher, coach, principal, and administrator. And in Mississippi was named the Principal of the Year one year. So we have a lot to learn from all of these panelists. Panel, thank you so much for being here. And you know, I just shared a really brief kind of overview of the roles that you hold or have held, but that doesn't tell us a lot about what you have actually accomplished in your careers. And I know you're going to do that better than I ever would. So will each of you please take a couple minutes to introduce yourself to the audience, talk about the things that you're proudest of in terms of sparking positive change and data points that help us understand how those things have impacted your students. Jade, do you mind starting for us?
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much. Again, Jade Rivera, I'm the founder and executive director of Albuquerque Collegiate Charter School. I think the thing that I am most proud of in the work that we have done is this idea of proving what is truly possible, right? I think oftentimes in New Mexico, we have this unfortunate, maybe pobrecito mentality, right? It's so hard and our kids are so poor and it's so this and it's just, and we can get really bogged down in that, right? My hope is that at Albuquerque Collegiate, we've helped to start shifting this narrative and showing it is possible. So the thing that I am most proud of in terms of data points, most recently, our school from last year's data, our literacy results were 20 percentage points higher than that of the state. Our early literacy results were nearly double that of the state. And I say all of that because that's really awesome, and our kids are outstanding, and our teachers are kicking butt every single day. And I say that with the context that our school has a higher rate of low-income students than the state, a higher rate of students with disabilities than the state, a higher rate of English learners, which is more than double that of the state, and a higher rate of students of color than the state. So this pobrecito mentality has no place in our schools. Our kids can do this, our teachers can do this, if provided the right supports.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I think, you know, you asked us a question when we were preparing about kind of a data point that we're most proud of. And I think there are a number of things that I'm proud of, but I'm going to go back all the way to when I first started in 1995. I just graduated from UNM with a history degree, and I always told people, well, with a history degree, I can either go to graduate school and I can also have great dinner conversation, but I can't really get a job with that, right? So I got me a job as a paraprofessional or an educational assistant at Bernalillo Middle School, and I became an educational assistant in a special education classroom for students with emotional behavior disturbances. There were 13 kids in there that had extremely violent tendencies. And I remember it was around this time, it was actually in February of 1996, that all of the staff were going to an after-school meeting to do their test training, their annual test training that they have to get. You know, basically somebody sits there, reads all the test requirements, and then you sign off that you know the test requirements. That's what it was back then. Anyway, when I showed up, the principal said, "You don't have to go." And I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "Well, your kids don't take the test." And I said, "Oh, cool." I'm a young teacher. Walk away, go back to my classroom. And I was an EA, but the teacher left, so I took over the classroom as an EA for the remainder of the year. So that night I thought, well, why don't my kids get to take a test? Like, they should get a chance to prove themselves that they can do this, right? So I petitioned the principal. The principal said, "Oh, heck no, it's going to make us look bad." Anyway, ended up going that I actually worked all the way up to the superintendent. Now I'm the superintendent. I'm not sure that I'd want people to do that, but I worked my way up to superintendent. He liked my argument. He said, okay, your kids can test. Be careful what you ask for. Every single one of those kids tested in the first percentile on the Terra Nova test. If everybody remembers the norm reference Terra Nova test. So I was devastated because I felt like I failed those kids. I almost quit teaching. I was also a plumber at the time, so I thought, well, I can go do that. What I ended up doing is sticking it out, really kind of just thinking about what I had done. And we didn't have standards at the time. We had district benchmarks that were vague and, just so many different things. But I stuck it out, and that first cohort, the 13 kids that I had, 7 of them were 6th graders that matriculated with me through 8th grade. It was a self-contained classroom. I taught them all subjects. They were in the first percentile in math and reading. Some of them finished as high as the 30th percentile by their 8th grade. So again, kind of to reiterate what Jade said, it's possible if you give them a chance. But I think I live, the reason why I shared that is that kind of set me up for the rest of my career, and the trajectory I took is never believing that we can't and always saying, why not try? So thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
All right. I think we're all going to have a really similar message up here, and that's that change is possible for our schools, and that high achievement is possible for our students, and that means every single student. I think as I look back on my career, when I'm looking at changes that we've made in the schools that I've gotten to work at, there are two accomplishments that really stand out to me. I was a longtime resident of Gallup, lived out there for 17 years, and worked in a variety of schools there. But at Gallup High, which is 85% Native American and all low income, we really did a lot of work around relevant learning, around career-related learning and college-related learning, and making sure our students were prepared. And so my last freshman cohort that I worked with, when they graduated, they had the 6th highest graduation rate in the state, right behind Cleveland, above Los Alamos, above La Cueva, above all of those schools. And so I think that was a really significant accomplishment that shows that this is possible for all students. I think the other piece is down here at Whittier, just a few blocks away, over by the corner of Catherine and San Mateo, and I know Gabriella lived this one with me. We got defined as the worst school in the state. She came and got me and said, hey, can you go do this for me? We worked really, really hard. At the time when we tested those kids on interim assessments, the very first time around, the average kid was 2.5 grade levels below where they should be. That's the average kid. By the time we kind of wrapped things up and I moved on to where I'm at now, the school had moved to traditional status in New Mexico Vistas, which is huge, and they're right at state averages in their achievement, and still growing. So I'm really, really proud of what the teachers did down there, because they became true experts in how you teach reading and how you work with students who have a lot of trauma and are really in need.
Good morning. Good to be with you. I love hearing these stories of hope. We need hope. Hope's important, especially in a time of great change. And I want to share a couple of things I'm really proud of from my previous life in Mississippi, and one here that I'm real proud of that the superintendent charged me with when she hired me for the job that I'm in now. I am a product of education. I come from the bottom of the Mississippi Delta, which is where 20 of the 40 poorest counties in America are. My mom was a 55-year public school teacher. My grandmother was a 44-year public school teacher. I feel like I know the business a little bit. Many grocery store parent conferences over the years at TG&Y or Sears or A&P. In Mississippi, I was fortunate to go through a internship similar to some of our internship programs that we're operating in our districts at Ole Miss, if you're a hotty-toddy Rebels fan. back in 2010 and 11, I went through this program and I was placed at Pelahatchie Elementary School, dead in the center of the state. If you blink, you'll miss it. At the time, believe it or not, the KKK still marched through town once a month. There was a relatively well-funded white private school, 1 block in front of my school. I got everybody else. Meth was rampant in the town and had been. I was a 5th principal in 7 years. And I hired a bunch of great teachers, and in 2 years, we went from an F-rated school to a B-rated school. And that was incredible to be a part of. The momentum was palpable. We made many of the same changes that we're trying to make here in Albuquerque and throughout the state in terms of how we're teaching kids to read. After that, I moved to another school similar to North Star, and then my wife got a job out here. We came out to the great state of New Mexico and became Burqueños. Even though I sound funny, I'm a Burqueño. And I took on with the district, and so I'm real proud of that work in Mississippi, and we'll talk more about that later. But then I got an opportunity to interview for the North Star job, and Superintendent Blakey hired me, and I'm grateful for that. And she charged me at the time and said, as great as North Star is, we've got the biggest gap between low performers and high performers in all of the Albuquerque schools, Albuquerque public schools. And that really hit me in the heart as the father of a son with autism and, knowing the challenges that we have in our state. And I took that to heart, and so did our instructional council, and that's been our focus in the 1.5 years that I've been there. How can we close this gap using best practices, love these kids, raising them up right, and making sure that they have the same access to a great future that everybody else does. So thanks for the opportunity to be here with you today.
So I hope it's encouraging to everybody hear the consistent theme that it is possible to make significant change and positive change for our kids. It is also challenging. We know that here in New Mexico, it's been extra challenging. You know that from the data of our students' proficiency. So let's do a little context setting here on our challenge. For decades, and most people here don't know this, we've ranked out of your bottom national student proficiency measures. In the most recent national assessments, we were 50th again in reading, 50th in math proficiency, with 4th grade proficiency rates hovering around 20%, and 8th grade proficiency rates even lower than that. So what that means is that out of the 300,000 or so students that we have enrolled in schools here in New Mexico, 240,000 of them are not proficient, and they're losing ground as they go through their academic careers. So that's a challenge. And at the same time, we also know that over the last 10 years, as a state, we have increased our education funding by 70%, which seems really significant, but it has not changed our proficiency outcomes for our kids at all. So we know there's something that we've got to do differently, and that is a big part of what sparked this Changemakers effort. If you're increasing your funding by 70%, and you're not seeing outcomes changing, you know that it's not just a funding issue, right? We know that this is an execution issue. We know this is a systems issue. And that can be really intimidating. It can make us feel like there is no way to make progress. Fortunately, we have examples, as Principal Barlow mentioned, from other places like Mississippi, where great change has happened with those same systemic challenges. So last year, we had a couple of different Changemakers sponsored events where we had school leaders from Mississippi and also from Louisiana who have made great change. Here's the data on that. Between 2013 and 2024, so 11 years, 4th grade proficiency levels in Mississippi increased from near the bottom to 16th. And in fact, I think on the 4th grade reading proficiency scores, they just around the top 10. Between 2019 and 2024, even more impressive than the numbers you're seeing on screen, 4th grade proficiency reading levels and reading proficiency levels in Louisiana improved from 58 to 16. And you can see that overall they went in that 6-year span from 48th to 35th. So
the ability to move from the bottom echelon to the top is proven. We know it's possible, and we know that we haven't gotten there yet in New Mexico, but that we can, and that's what this effort is about. So let's get deeper into what doing the right things mean, right? Because Louisiana and Mississippi have been doing a lot of the right things. That has been what has fueled their rise in student proficiency rates. Each of you have made significant positive changes in your schools and districts. What are, if you had to pick 2 or 3 decisions or practices that have been responsible for really creating that positive change, what would you say those are? Principal Rivera, if you could.
Yes, I'd be happy to. So the answer is not some like secret, sexy, exciting thing. It really is like super basic stuff. Supporting teachers. That doesn't just mean making sure during Teacher Appreciation Week they have cute lunches and themed notes. It is actually about making sure they have really high quality resources in their classroom every single day. That the expectation is that they're utilizing those resources and that they are receiving really consistent and robust coaching to get better at their craft, because they are the ones that are going to move the needle for the kids in our classroom. I pay the bills and hopefully do some other impactful things at the building, but they are the ones that are the most important factor in our kids learning or not. And so the most important thing then that I can do or other leaders can do is ensure our teachers feel successful every single day when they hit the parking lot at the end of the day. That they feel like I got better at what I am doing so that I can support my students to get better at what they are doing. That means being in their classrooms every single day. My teachers think it is a weird thing if there is not another adult that has come into their classroom and given them some sort of feedback every day. That is unfortunately not the case in many schools around our country. And so our leaders have to make the dedicated time to do that every day. But if we're not getting better at our practice, we're not getting supported to get better, we're just trying to learn from Pinterest or the internet or just continuing to do things that are not data informed. And so having that success, I think, is a huge piece of the work that we focused on at our school in ensuring our teachers stay in the classroom and continue doing really good, impactful work. So I think that's the piece for us that has made that huge difference.
Superintendent.
So I would say there are probably 3 key things that we've done and that we've stuck to. The first thing that I was able to do when I came in, obviously you have to have a supportive board to be able to accomplish these things, but I was able to completely turn over the leadership of the entire district. So by February of 2022 that was my first, 21-22 was my first year in the role. By February, I notified every single leader, director, coordinator, and principal, assistant principal that they were not going to be renewed and that they could reapply for the positions or any positions that were opening. And we turned over every single position in the district, looking for high quality principals and high quality support staff. Kind of what Jade said. If we have principals that are instructional leaders that are in the classrooms and coaching their teachers, they're going to get better quickly. So that was the first thing. The next thing we did is we went from a K-3 training of letters to K-6 training of letters. So all of our elementary teachers got trained in the letters process. And then we also contracted with the May Center to provide follow-up service to our teachers, because the letters training, it's great training, it's necessary training, but there's, I think, implementation concerns that happen just when you have the training. You don't always get the implementation. So we brought the May Center to come and support them in that process. And then the other thing that we did is we adopted high quality instructional materials in both math and reading, and now in social studies we have them, and we're going to be adopting science, but we've required high quality instructional materials. You would think that having better tools, like, you know, I always use analogies going back to the construction industry because I worked there for so long, but like, I can't imagine me wanting to use a handsaw over a skill saw when I'm building, right? When I'm framing something. But we got so much pushback from teachers saying, well, you're tying our hands, we want autonomy. And we said, no, we're going to guarantee that kids get standards-based instruction with the best materials that are available. And so I think those are the three main things that we did, and we've stuck to it. You know, what's really cool is we're in year 4 of doing this, and there's no surprises to anybody. They know exactly what's coming. They know exactly what the expectations are. So I think those are the main factors.
Yeah, I want to highlight something that Superintendent Montaño said, because there's sort of a meta strategy here when you have a strong leader. You're going to want to focus on just 1 to 2 things per year. One of the things that happens in education is it's everything in the kitchen sink. Everybody's coming at you. You're supposed to be the catch-all for everything that's going on in society, and really coming in, hearing that, you know, each of these leaders has had very, very specific initiatives, very, very specific strategies that they are using and dedicating themselves to. I always picture of it as being, you know, in the middle of a tornado or in the middle of a hurricane, and you need to have that calm center for your teachers, and you're protecting them from, you know, flying houses and couches and automobiles and everything that's coming at them. You're always getting back to what are those things that we are working on? What are those things that we know are going to make a difference? So that's a meta strategy that I think you're going to hear from all of us. I think the other piece that has helped me at each of the schools is this idea of time for teacher collaboration. When we're throwing all these things at teachers, right? We talk about structured literacy, and I think my colleague over here, Mr. Barlow, will probably talk about the Mississippi Miracle a little bit. But when we're talking about a strategy like that, if you don't give teachers time to actually learn it, to practice it together, to maybe make some mistakes, but to come back together and talk about, well, did that work for you in your classroom? You know, how come your scores are higher than mine? Or what worked for you? I've got that kid who's running around and doing crazy things. How do I get that kid engaged in this? And they don't have time to actually talk about the strategies that they're being asked to use or the initiatives they're being asked to implement. Those things aren't going to make any difference. And our state keeps paying money for those without allowing that time for our teachers, for our professionals to really, really learn how to use them effectively.
Thanks, Ms. Finke. I'll speak a little about culture. I think any day of the week, culture trumps achievement. Achievement is super important, but you can't have one without the other. I'll also say that Mississippi Miracle has become a term in the news that you hear a lot. I'd say that I like that term, and I love having my name attached to that change. There's a lot of hard work. I'm super proud of it. However, it was more like a Mississippi marathon. I think that's super important. It took a long way to get the way we were in Mississippi, and it took some time to get out of that way. So, Superintendent Montaño spoke a minute ago about we're kind of in this mid-years, 4 or 5 years into this change. We're about the same, and we're starting to see some gains. And whether it's in Albuquerque Public Schools and the way Superintendent Blakey celebrates small wins in front of the principals at our meetings, or whether it is in Mississippi, one thing I really learned is that when you're in a great change, you got to have urgency and you got to have compassion. It's a big thing going on, a lot of moving parts, and you got to celebrate the small wins. So, like on the ground, I think of myself as an instructional leader, not a principal. My most important job is safety, and right after that is getting in those classrooms and observing good teaching and learning, asking feedback questions, giving warm feedback where I see it deserved and needed. And I think that when you're doing those things at the school level and at the district level, at the state level, and you're celebrating those small wins and focusing on a culture of achievement, you'll see those gains and you'll start to see those changes. And by celebrating small wins, I mean nitty gritty, like watching a teacher try a new practice. They're nervous, they've just learned it, but it's super impactful across the differentiation spectrum of learners. We need to be doing that. We need to have bells on doing that. We need to get after it and be urgent and compassionate. And I love celebrating our teachers when I see them trying new things that are best practice and they're going to really impact kids on the fringe or the low performers in my school. That matters a lot to me. That's where our goals are focused, and I try to keep it focused around those things. Culture of achievement, focused on our school goals, celebrating the small wins that we see. And by small wins, I mean changes in adult behavior that'll help kids improve outcomes.
Those are some fantastic insights. Principal Finke, why don't you hold on to that? Because I'm going to go back to your question. You mentioned in your practices that the state provides a lot of materials that perhaps we don't have enough time, or our teachers don't have enough time to really absorb and use properly. That's a challenge to making changes that we want to see. Can you talk about that challenge, and then in general, and can you talk about some of the challenges that are keeping us from seeing the improvement that we want?
So the analogy I always use, because I come from a family, I'm the only person who's not a doctor or lawyer in my family. It would be like giving a surgeon a new tool, and they're going to use this tool for your surgery, right? They're really into robotic surgeries these days. But you're not going to give them time to practice, and now they're coming into the operating room and they're going to cut you open with that. I don't think that we would do that in that venue, but we do that in education for whatever reason here in the United States. Other countries do not, we do. So they really, really need that time to practice and collaborate. I mean, there are structures to do it. One of the best things that happened to me when I moved down to Whittier, and I know Matt was part of it on the PED end, Gabrielle was part of it on the APS end, was we were given the gift of time with our teachers. They invested money, lots of money, into time for those teachers to collaborate every single day, just like they do at the Mayo Clinic. And so that was really, really huge. Probably one of the best vehicles I have right now at my high school is we have common professional learning community time built into the schedule 3 times a week, where all of my algebra teachers get together, or we have a freshman academies initiative. My freshman teachers get together and they discuss students, and we've seen the needle move based off of that time together. So those are really important structures.
I mean, I can speak from my perspective, kind of throughout my career trajectory, both here at the state level, in Texas at the state level, and then in my district. I do think that in our public education system, we struggle with the urgency that we may have as educators. There's not necessarily that urgency in our communities by a lot of our families. You know, I think what you see are those, when you say, hey, we want to make these changes, often people are like, why we can just do the same thing we've always been doing. And that's been a big struggle that I've hit up against in my district, definitely as a principal. And it's not just with the teachers, it's with parents. Every parent wants the best education for their kid until you actually assess them at grade level standard, and they're getting a C at grade level standard, let's say, and they're saying, my kid's not a C, you know, and they don't want to accept that. And that happens more often than you think. So I think it's kind of like mindset shifts. And I think it's to what Ben said, and I have a really good friend, AJ Crabill, who leads school board work across the country. And he has a saying, student outcomes won't change until adult behaviors change. And I think we have to have adult behavior changes within the school system, but definitely building that capacity. I know I'm looking at Gloria because she tried to do that work with families for a while for the public ed department. I think that's something that we need to just get more momentum behind, is changing the perspective of we have to have high standards as a school, as a school system across the state, regardless of whether you're public, private, whether you're charter or traditional. That has to be the universal expectation.
To dig in on that for just a minute, with families in particular, because we know that's such an important part of any student's life, are there best practices that you all have implemented in your schools for engaging families and turning them into the allies that the schools and the students need?
I think we miss opportunities in schools when we do family. Like if you have a student performance, you get families to your schools, right? If you have food, you get families to your schools. We often have done things where we bring them to the schools and we leave out the ability to actually educate them, motivate them, and potentially influence them differently. So what we've done in Bernalillo for the last 5 years is any of our family engagement processes where we have cultural days or whatever, we know we're going to get families there. We're going to actually bring them into classrooms and teach them things that we're doing and try to educate them more and more. We show them the instructional materials. We actually have little kind of like stations where they can go and understand this better. And it makes them more at ease with the things that we're shifting to, right? A lot of families, they're just not school people. So we get them into schools, we show them what school is looking like.
Yeah, I want to step back to the previous question about conditions and just highlight the idea that came out in our previous discussion was, when there's clear alignment with the district, in the district goals, the school goals, top to bottom, side to side, that's super helpful so that everybody's got a direction. It can't be that everybody is going their own direction. And I know that sounds simple, but it's way more complex than it sounds. I think that's super important. There's a lot of good that came out of the Mississippi Marathon, but Mississippi doesn't get a lot of things right. A lot. That Annie E. Casey Foundation report, look at it. I mean, there's a lot where New Mexico ranks way higher than Mississippi, like caring for kids. So I just want to point that out, that Mississippi got reading right, but there's a lot of places that we're getting right now, and we're working on reading, and it's going to improve because we're all here doing it with y'all. And so let me get to family engagement. That is the approach. That's the approach my mama took. That's the approach my grandmama took. That's the approach. We're in this together, raising these kids up through thick and thin. And it will be thick and thin. There'll be challenges, there'll be successes, and it's got to be all together. And we need to realize as educators, increasingly we need to operate under the premise that not all families look the same. Those days are over. I've got families in my school, I'm sure y'all do too, that this grandparent ended up with a child, they don't even know how to use a computer, and they're trying to raise a child. We need to work with them. We need to reach across to them and invite them into our school. And I mean in every way. Make it doable. Don't load them down with 100 things. We have parents who can't read and write. Don't embarrass them. Give them something they can. They can ask their child 2 questions about what are they reading. What are you reading? What's the best part of it? Who's the character that you like? They can do that without reading. They can do that. You got to find things they can do. And the other day I got the chance to facilitate a panel at the New Mexico PTA conference, and on that panel were family members, and they weren't your average family members. There was a grandmama and a dad and a foster mama and a kid, and one of the questions I asked them was, how do you want to be engaged? And they all said, invite me, ask me, make it doable. So the dad was involved with this group called Watchdogs, and many schools have tried this thing over time. It's like how do we get our dads involved in something they want to do? And because they may not want to come in and volunteer to serve cookies in the classroom, but they may stand out at the traffic duty and help that be civil and nice so the kids come in on a good day, right? And so my point is, and I'll wrap it up here and pass over to Jade, find something they can do, meet them where they are. I know we say that, meet them where they are. What does that mean? It's different for different people. Grandparent who ended up with child, that's a different meeting place than daddy who's engaged but needs you to work around his work schedule because he's driving a truck at night.
So bring us on challenges and help us.
Yeah, I think oftentimes we will hear, oh, well, families don't want to be engaged, or those families, which is very coded language for lots of colorful things I have thoughts on that I won't repeat here. But what I would say is our families come to us from all walks of life. It is our job to educate our students. And we know that the education of our children doesn't just happen from 7:30 a.m. to 3:15 p.m., right? There is a lot of education that happens outside of that. And how do we make sure our families are set up as partners in this work? And so for us, we try to make pretty minimal asks of our families. I'm not saying that it is best practice, it is what has worked best for us. But those expectations are, you have to come for family conferences twice a year. You have to. We run a 12-hour day, and we want you in person. We have 99% attendance for those family conferences, because we start meeting with people at 7 o'clock in the morning to do that. and give them plenty of scheduling time ahead of time. Those conferences also don't sound like what I think when we were growing up, kind of our conferences are, oh, you know, Jade is just, she's a real sweetheart. I didn't say that. She's a little chatty, right? It actually sounds like, you know what, Jade is really working on these key skills in reading. This is her Lexile level, and here's where she's struggling academically right now, and here are some programs she could work on at home, and here are the letter sounds that she has mastered, and here are the exact letter sounds that she hasn't. So here are the things that she should be working on at home over this next 6 weeks. We have the expectation that our teachers have positive communication home for every single individual student at least once a month. And that's not the, oh, calling and, you know, Matt had, you know, another, you know, in altercation with another student, or we weren't playing nicely on the playground. It is, Matt is doing really well in these things with math. We're noticing that he's still struggling with some of his 2-digit division. So that's something that we should work on over this next month, right? How are we engaging our families as partners? And how are we getting key things that they can be working on and supporting at home? And I think that is some of that difference, and making sure our families are informed about the things that we are doing and what they can be supporting their kiddos with at home as well.
We spoke in our prep call, the things that we've heard from you that were really critical are being able to focus on accountability versus compliance. Being able to start things, learn, build on them, not try to boil the ocean all at once, and to get everybody working as a team, everybody involved, pulling in the same direction, getting buy-in from people. How do we find or create leaders who can ensure that we are able to do those things and meet those challenges? And Principal Rivera, since you got the mic on.
Sure, no pressure on that. I think the biggest thing is learning from really, really good leaders. I think that's in any of our work, if we've gotten to a place of success, we can directly tie so much of that to learning from someone who was smarter than us, more seasoned than us, had a great amount of success, and we had that mentorship experience and coaching. And I think that's a piece that a lot of our leaders don't have access to. And maybe you have some mentorship opportunities as you're becoming a school principal, getting an administrative license, but what does the quality and effectiveness of that look like? Are we learning from other leaders who have had a proven track record and not just have been in their roles for 20 years, right? And then also for our continuing leadership, do we have access to continued learning, continued professional development and expertise building, so that we don't become stagnant? So we're not becoming the people that say, well, we've always done it this way. How awful, right? But for so many of us, you reach a certain point in your career and maybe you don't have access to that continuous learning, and continuous learning from the best out there, many of whom are here in New Mexico and many who are outside of New Mexico. And so I know for myself, for my team, that has been a factor that's been huge, that continuous learning and from people that are really moving the needle for kids and have that proven track record.
So, I mean, I think this is a complex issue. We talked a little bit about it. And before I move on, because whenever I see other people from Bernalillo, I got to shout them out. Ariana, she used to be Chavez. I don't think she's Chavez. She's a Berna kid. She was one of my students when I was an assistant principal and principal. Graduated with my oldest daughter. But she's a true leader. She was a leader when she was in middle school, so I knew her from that perspective. I think that part of it is cultivating programs that are going to actually lead toward better skill sets of our leaders, right? So we talk about ed prep or graduate programs that are cultivating them. They still fall short on those for the most part, except we do have some programs. I know that the University of New Mexico had a program through Anderson School for principalships. It's a great program, great people, great skills coming out of that. But I don't know that it always has the will factor, right? So you have to find people that have a will to do this. And we talked earlier this morning, and I would give Kim, for the record, she said the principalship is a lifestyle. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for people that see it as a lifestyle, that leadership component, that role, because it's not an 8 to 5 job. If you're bitter because you get calls at 7 o'clock at night or at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever, we're walking in and literally there's a fire going on near one of my campuses. So I was trying to deal with that. We were talking about snakes running around campuses and those kinds of things. But it is a lifestyle, and you have to vet for those people that are looking for this lifestyle. And I think that's part of what we have to think about. I have long been convinced that we need to diversify the access to the principalship and to the administrative licenses in New Mexico. Other states have that access. And I'm not saying that everybody can be a school principal. It takes actually very special, and believe me, the school principal is the most important single factor on whether schools are going to improve or not, the quality of that principal. But if you look at going back to Bloomberg being the mayor in New York City, he hired Joel Klein to be his chancellor. Joel Klein had no background in education. He flipped New York City on its head and turned it into a better district. I'm convinced by seeing both two people that I work with that didn't have extensive backgrounds. Hannah Scandera, she didn't have a background in education, but boy, did she know reading, instruction like anybody else, because she took the time to learn it. And so when you think about leadership, you do that. Mike Morath was the commissioner when I was deputy commissioner in Texas. He could explain the science of reading as well as any reading teacher could. And he could go into classrooms, and I would go into classrooms with him, and he could see when instruction was going quality and when it wasn't. He would always come to me excited, say, "You see how they're doing it? It's wrong. It's wrong. Somebody needs to correct him," But he knew it. And the reason why I say that is if we diversify the access, many of you guys could step into the principalships or into district level leadership, because many of you guys are leaders that just haven't gone that pathway. And I think that would be one way to scale it, is to diversify how we do it. I know that there's a lot of naysayers to that, but I feel like we're leaving good talent in the parking lot instead of bringing them into the building.
So I want to piggyback off what Superintendent Montaño had to say. I don't know if we are always looking for the right things in our principals. And the formula is simple. If you want a great district, it's made up of great schools. And if you want great schools, you have to have a great principal in place. That is the single most important gatekeeper in any district, because that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, and they determine what goes on in their schools. I don't know if we always look for the right skill sets. Matt referenced skill sets. I went into administration when I was 28. I was a junior high band director. So in a lot of ways, I would not be the obvious choice to lead a turnaround that involves literacy, or to go into a high school classroom and talk to my calculus teacher or my French teacher, my AP French teacher, where the kids are just speaking fluently in there. I don't speak French. Definitely not. We have this idea in education that you need to spend all this time in the classroom, and many of those people are great principals, but the skills that you need in the classroom are not the same skills you need in the front office. The skills you need in the front office are the ability to get down to business and really see what's the thing. If I just pulled one lever today to make a difference in my school, what is that one lever, and how do I get people who don't want to do that to do that? That's the skill set that we need. And it might not always be the most obvious person who's been in the classroom for 25 years and is national board certified teacher. And yes, you need people who are kind of tough, because you get kicked around a lot.
I'd add to that I do think the days of, I'll just pull from my past, Coach Hasselman, who was a coach at the high school I went to in the Delta, who was a coach for 5 years and a principal for 45 years. I think those days are over. Coach Hasselman didn't care a hoot about instruction. He didn't know anything about it. He liked a firm, well-run school, and he left it to the teachers, and in some ways, helped the decline, because we weren't collaborating on those issues. In 2010, I was standing in my duty post in the boys' bathroom on the 11th and 12th grade hall at Northwest Rankin High School, 2,400 students, busting at the seams, keeping kids from vaping or dropping M80s in the toilet, and smoking at the time was the big deal. And I met this guy. He was wandering around our hallways. His name was Chris Graves. He was checking on kids and doing all this busy work. And I was like, "Who are you? Tell me about yourself." He said, "Oh, I'm Chris Graves. I'm doing an internship through Ole Miss called the Principal Course, CORPS." I said, "Wow, tell me more about it." So we went and had coffee. And the next year I applied for and was accepted into the Ole Miss Principal Corps. Who remembers Netscape? Remember that? And everybody knows what FedEx is. So FedEx and Netscape was founded by a Mississippian named Jim Barksdale, who also took FedEx global in Memphis. And Mr. and Miss Barksdale gave maybe north of $180 million of their own money to the great state of Mississippi to help improve literacy, including starting the Barksdale Reading Institute, which is on the campus of the University of Mississippi. And that was the impetus for the Principal Corps. I was in the third cohort, and the whole idea was get some folks who are surefire teachers, teaching like their hair's on fire, and they want to be leaders, get them in this cohort, send them to a couple of different schools. For me, I went to an elementary and a middle school because I'd been a high school teacher and a basketball coach. And I went and learned those worlds during my internship while going to Ole Miss every 3 weeks for a week, while my wife was pregnant with our first child, while she was getting her PhD. And we ate a lot of ramen noodles that year. And I learned many of these lessons that are super important. And I learned how a leader leads fearlessly and with urgency. And I think that when I think about principals, I think about my own experience from a teacher to a principal in 3 different schools. And I'll also mention just a perspective on what Matt said about educator preparation programs. Change takes time. I can very well remember in 2011-12, I was at Pelahatchie Elementary School working 14-hour days, commuting 35 miles one way to work, and having conversations with fellow principals on this new thing called Google Meet about the kinds of teachers we wanted to hire, and the ones that were coming out of Ole Miss and Mississippi State seemed to be getting this new thing called science of reading, and which really isn't new, it just has rolled back around. And we were looking for folks like that. And I remember when those changes happened in our flagship universities in Mississippi. I think we're doing some of those things here now in New Mexico, where we're making sure that our new teachers are trained in the ways that are going to help them grow kids. So again, going back to changes in adult behavior that are effective to help change outcomes for kids.
Some of us got exiled. Some of us got exiled.
My old boss. I mean, I got to tell you, I had to tell them all, please. And the district stance at the time, I feel like was, well, these schools aren't that bad, the state's being mean. I had to tell my school board member, it's every bit as bad as they said. It's every bit as bad as they said. And probably they should shut it, but you hired me to run it. And then I might have had to call my boss because they rejected the plan to turn them around. And I had heard that Chris Ruskowski was showing up at a meeting, and I was like really high on cold medicine. I should not take meds, it's always a bad thing. And Matt was there, and I showed up and I was like, hey you, why are you doing this? Because, and just asking people for that space, right? There was an argument over the urgency and getting people to step back and just have confidence in who we hired. Again, turnaround, I'm gonna say this, yes, the strategy that you need to replace the principal and get a true turnaround principal is #1 strategy. But then please let them do what they need to. I'm a big believer in tights and looses. There was a lot of back and forth about exactly how we needed to progress monitor, and I had to come back and tell the state, no, that's not how I do it, so I'm not gonna do it that way. And then I had to ask my bosses, please don't fire me, because I told the state no. Give me the tight, tell me what you want, but let me loosely do my thing in there. I promise I'm gonna get you there. And I mean, this goes back to the leader equation too. Don't be afraid to remove a leader who's not making it happen. That has to happen in our schools.
The question is, if you had control of all that increase in funding over the last 10 years that we've had here in New Mexico, and you could spend those dollars on one thing, what would that be?
I'll answer that. I would go back 15 years to work that I believe was good work. I would go back to building a school grade system that makes sense to community members. I think, Ben, you talked about moving a school from F to B. When I came back from Texas, I remember the superintendents welcoming. I knew most of the superintendents from my time at PED, and them welcoming. They say, "We wish we had school grades. We don't understand this thing." And it's interesting because that wasn't the case at the time. And I know that's not 100% what people think. So I would bring back school grades. I would use student achievement measures to measure teacher effectiveness, principal effectiveness. I would just bring back the playbook that we were running with in 2000. By the time we got to 2016, we had a full playbook. And then I think one key factor, and this is what we're missing, because Mississippi has done letters. One of the things that we were really trying to get in place was third grade retention, and it was messaged as we want to just retain every third grader in the state, and that's not possible. But it was actually kind of the stick to the carrots that were all the other things that were occurring. I think that was part of it. And when we talk about teacher evaluation, it wasn't so much about evaluating, but it was about differentiating teachers so you could serve the best. You can have the best teachers serving the most needy students. I think that is probably likely what's happening at Jade's school. Is she has amazing teachers serving needy students, and they're getting the results because of it. And then the last thing is we've got to move away from just throwing money that is earmarked to districts. 99 cents of every dollar is already told to us how we're going to spend it. And I'm certain that Superintendent Blakey definitely could think of more innovative, effective ways to spend her money than having the state tell us exactly how to spend it. They should have the accountability that says, if you don't do the things that you need to do to raise the bar, not be compliant, but raise the bar, then we're going to dictate it more, because that's how that kind of thing can work.
What role, if any, did the business community play in the Mississippi area?
Oh, the community was super involved in our situation. Nobody in the state of Mississippi was happy with what we were doing with children. I'm 53, so I was taught with phonics and phonemic awareness, and then like many other states across the United States, Mississippi got away from that. We went with whole language. Then in 2019, an article came out in the New York Times says that was disproven. It doesn't. It's not how kids learn to read. And then, of course, in 2021, that article came out that Nicholas Kristof wrote about the miracle. That's where that all came from. The business community was super important. Talk about the third grade gate. I don't want to get into politics. I can't imagine a law like that would pass here in New Mexico. But Mississippi's a different animal. It's a super red state, and they're always trying to chip away at the public schools, take away money and this, that, and other, and vouchers, and there was a lot of energy behind making sure those public schools did right by our kids, and that's where that law came from. And I think it was overwhelmingly passed. And then we were kind of like, okay, what's next? And the state provided a lot of support for teachers and learners. Business community got behind it and talked positively about the change, which is, I think, one of the most important things you can do. If I don't want to task you, but if you really want to help, like, talk about the change in positive ways. And it will take time. We will all benefit, but it will take time. We have to stay with it. Remember, it's not a miracle. It was a marathon. And that's not, I'd imagine it'll be similar here. It took a long time to get that way. It's going to take time to get out. I'll tell you another thing. I just want to touch on family engagement just real briefly. One of the things we were asked to do in my school district, Rankin County School District, right smack in the middle of Mississippi, big diverse district, county district, with a lot of different communities. One of the things we were asked to do was to kind of take the scary off of the third grade gate situation, and our district front loaded us as administrators and support staff to be able to do that. So what we did at my school, at Pelahatchie Elementary and then at Highland Bluff Elementary, we just brought all the Chromebooks or whatever we had at the time. We brought them in. At Pelahatchie Elementary, they wouldn't come to the meeting unless I fed them. So we figured out, got some partners with business. They fed us catfish. That's what we love. And we had catfish after the meeting. Because if you have catfish before the meeting, they're not staying. Because the meeting could be boring, or maybe they just don't know enough and they get tired of listening. But we brought out the computers and we took the sample test together. We just said, let's take a look at it so you'll know, like, they were both for the change, but also nervous about their babies. And, there was all these rumors, we're going to fail 50% of the state. That's not what happened. There were lots of scaffolds put in so that, and, there was a moving goal to get to over the years as we got better at teaching. We raised the goal up for proficiency on that test. But we brought them in and we showed them what the items we're looking for and used that as a chance to train them so that they would know, when the most important thing we can do is encourage our kids to get through this time of great change and encourage our teachers to get through this time of great change and make changes that are substantial and that help our kids get the outcomes they want so they can live the life that they want to live. And I would say that the business community was very much behind it once the change was enacted. I did not feel pressure at the school about making quick changes and finger pointing and all that. They knew what was going on, and it had been bad a long time. So I felt like the business community, like you here today, are engaged, you're urgent about it, and you're compassionate about it. I would encourage everybody to keep that outlook. That's going to help us a lot.
I just wanted to talk to the business community for one moment from a high school perspective. When I talk about the graduation rates that we were able to drive in Gallup, and they still have strong graduation rates up there, we sort of launched an initiative to organize students around career pathways and career clusters, and really push this idea of the relevance of education. When you don't have a great graduation rate, usually one of the root causes is kids don't understand why they're there. And so they now have academies up in Gallup. They have a beautiful career center that they've built. Right now, APS is heading in that direction. You may have heard about Academies of Albuquerque on the news, you may not have. I believe that this is absolutely a step in the right direction. The idea behind it is they start with a freshman academy, right? We know that kids are not always successful their freshman year, and if you can keep them in school to their sophomore year and get their credits, they're going to be fine. But from then on, we should be arranging them around getting ready for life. And I'm not saying that you need to decide what you want to do when you're a sophomore. I always joke with kids who tell me, well, I don't know what I want to do for a career. That's a part of every discussion in our school. I tell them, well, I know you want to be a high school principal. That was always the dream for me. And they laugh. That was not my dream when I was a sophomore in high school. Anyway, the career academies, something that the business community can do is offer internships to our students. That's going to be a big component of that. I was lucky at Gallup High that I had a robust internship program when I stepped back into the role of being the principal. Offering externships so that kids can come out for a day and see, or a couple days, and see if they want a career in I don't know, tattoo artistry, or they want to be an entrepreneur. Coming and seeing what it is that you do every day, to have an idea behind that. You can sponsor buses for us to take kids down to CNM, down to New Mexico Tech, down to different places to see what are those educational options, up to, I don't know, Fort Lewis, right, that has a really strong program for Native American students. You can sponsor buses for those things. My school's always looking for people to do mock interviews. We have a very robust mock interview system that every sophomore goes through with business community members. So I think that there are things out there that our district is arranging that you can get very, very actively engaged in right away.
One more thing. In Albuquerque Public Schools, we are celebrating and embracing the profile of a graduate. And you should see these posters in your school everywhere. And if you don't, if you're in APS and you don't, ask your principal, where's that poster of the profile of a graduate? I mean, I know when she came to my school, I made sure those posters were everywhere. They were fresh. We had just got them. And all kidding aside, they make a lot of sense. So in elementary world, we're all about awareness and promoting those things. So we have business day, or we'll have folks come and tell us about what they do, and kids can ask questions. It's all about the awareness. And then you move on through middle school, there's a role to play there, and then you go to high school, there's a role to play there. There are many ways you can get involved if you have the time. I know our partners at Sandia Labs help us run our help us run our family science site. We had like 250 people come, and they were just out there playing with robots and having fun, eating cookies. And it's fun. So, have fun, be urgent, get involved in the way that you want to be involved. And if you're an APS, look for that profile of a graduate. That's really our goal, our vision is to build that child.
Says, could you please talk a little about the difference between training time for staff and learning time for staff? Are those different? The practice modeling, that kind of thing?
Wonderful question. I hope I get to the heart of it correctly. I will say, so a lot of the things that we do at our school are informed by what I regard as worst practice. When I started teaching in Las Vegas, Nevada, showed up at my school, they gave me a box of paper and the keys to my classroom and said, make the box last for the first semester. See you at noon for bloodborne pathogen training in the library. And this was 3 days roughly before the school year starts. That is for some schools, and at that time, and it was I worked at one of the worst middle schools in Las Vegas. That is what was considered training. That's not training. That's compliance. Those are requirements, right? What that looks like at our school, we have 2.5 weeks of coaching and training before the school year starts with our teachers. And I would say less than 2% of that time is compliance requirement focused. You are coming in July, and that's tough to sell to people, but you're coming in July 20th and you're starting training, and we are practicing in front of each other, and you are going to practice delivering lessons that you're going to deliver in the first week in front of other adults. And that's really hard and intimidating. But if you've done it well and you've gotten feedback on it right away before the school year starts, you're not doing it for the first time in front of 5-year-olds or 14-year-olds who are way meaner than adults. But I think that's what I view as the difference of training and coaching and robust, meaningful professional development. Right, that we are practiced in our craft, that we are improving upon it. We're modeling lessons and learning from each other, and it's not the compliance things. We are getting that constant feedback, and that's what makes that difference. We have days then during the school year, and it's not in-service days where we sit and watch a video or have somebody come in and tell us really nice things, but are not going to be able to be implemented in our classrooms the next day. We are spending time doing things that we can implement later that day, that we can implement tomorrow, and will make an impact for our students right away.
What is being done to translate these good and positive lessons learned to the district and state level?
Yeah, so letters training is the science of reading. It's the training on the science of reading based on Orton-Gillingham strategies, Orton-Gillingham methodology. For years and years, that's been a push here in New Mexico, but it's been kind of a voluntary push depending on where you are and so forth. I believe in 2020, the legislature funded universal letters training K through 3, but I believe it was actually optional, and now it's become the law that everybody has to have letters training for K through 3. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing that has happened here. I think we've talked about some of the shortcomings of it is that letters training is at the highest level really good training, but implementation of letters actually takes everything that Jade's talking about. You have to actually practice it, and so to go from the training right to the classroom, you actually have to put some practice into it before you can actually start delivering on it. So that's one of the areas that we're struggling with, I think, as a state. I definitely am struggling with it as a district. It's an area of need that we need to improve on as well. But I think that's the biggest thing that we're doing as a state that I can say.
I think one of the big ones that we pushed when we did the turnaround at the 3 schools was having enough seat time for students. Our elementary students had significantly less seat time than the states around us, and so we went and presented at the legislature several times. I think the slide's still rolling around out there about how much less seat time elementary students had than students in Colorado, Arizona, and Texas, immediately around us. So that's a really big one. And again, I go back to that push for career and technical education. And when I say career and technical education, I think people think kids who are going to be plumbers and electricians. And by the way, we have a shortage of those. If you've ever had your HVAC break in the summer, we need all of those folks. But it also means getting ready for careers in the medical industry and that kind of thing. Excited to go pin 3 kids who are graduating with their LPN here in a couple weeks. So the state support of those programs, that's really, really significant.
I have served in a district leadership role once as director of attendance here in Albuquerque Public Schools. I think I was the only one that applied for that job. It was a thankless job. It was a thankless job. We had just come out of COVID and nobody wanted to, everybody was discombobulated. And my main message at that time was just take attendance. Stand at your door and welcome children to your school. They haven't been here in a year and a half. Like, just do that, and know that we can do this. But I'll speak real briefly from my little position in a little elementary school. You got to lead from where you are, and you got to advocate for the right things, no matter what your audience is. Sometimes I get a chance to speak to folks like you or others at different conferences and things, and I like to use that platform to talk about what's right, what's good, and what the changes are that we've got to make as adults so that the kids can have the future they deserve. It's a crazy world out there. Kids don't like looking at the news. There's war everywhere. The water's drying up. They're talking about the river being dry by June. That's hard for kids to understand and process it. So we have to make it urgent, fun, awesome. We gotta think about like what we can control at the local level, and then make sure that, on my end of it, having gone through this once before in Mississippi, starting about 15 years ago, I find myself talking in many of the same language choices and many of the same ways to teachers and families about what we're doing. When I tour my school, I like to give tours to new families and tell them what they should be seeing in each grade and how it's a little different from the grade before and how we're trying to grow kids. And I think that's important. Just the language we use and the language choices we use when we're promoting the changes we're making. That's something you can do at the local level, and it can affect folks wherever you go. And I think that's important.
I would be remiss if I didn't give a plug for our public charter schools. I think as a leader of a charter school and within my new role, I would also say that a really great thing happening in our state is the work from our public charter schools. I'm joined by a couple of those leaders today. But our public charter schools in New Mexico are outpacing our traditional district counterparts in growth, in achievement, in performance for our most needed subgroups of students, and they're doing great work. I don't say that to disparage the work that anyone else in our traditional districts are doing. I think this is really hard and challenging work, and as community members continue to support them, because our public charter schools, I think, are often facing threats of closure or moratoriums or those kinds of things, and I want to say, check out the scoreboard. Our schools are doing a great job, and we have a lot of growth happening across the state, but our public charter schools in particular are continuing to show that growth. As birth rates continue to decline and we see enrollment rates shifting, families are exercising school choice and voting with their feet. And so where we can continue to support flexibilities and autonomies for our charter schools, that's going to be a really good area, I think, for continued growth and progress across New Mexico as well.
On them. As APS, you're the boots on the ground here, right? So as APS works to revise the restorative practice policies, where do you feel that those expectations can either help or handicap your school's budget?
I think there's a misconception. So my school, Cedar High School, is one of the pilot schools for restorative practices in APS. And I think the R word is a dirty word with high school employees. So we just call it culture of care, because I think teachers can get on board with this idea that they very much care about students. So we had to kind of shift the language that we were using. I also think that there's this myth about restorative practices that there are no consequences. Sometimes the consequences are natural. If you make a mess, you clean it up. I have a long story that I'm not going to tell about my kids doing a senior prank in Gallup and having to clean the school for senior week in order to walk. It was not popular. It was very controversial. Y'all can Google it because it was in the newspaper. But right, restorative practices is fundamentally about being able to repair the harms that you make in a community. Yeah, I just think reframing it as caring about students and making them truly accountable. When I send a kid home on suspension, they're laying on their mom's couch eating Cheetos and playing video games. Why? Because mom's at work. She's not taking time off to watch the kid. She can't take time off for 3 days because the kid did whatever down at the school. I do think one of the pieces of legislation, I don't even think it made it to committee, but I know that there were some legislators that were looking at this idea of creating what we call student success centers in schools. My school has one. We fund it with our own monies through a special education teacher, but it is that place where if a student's behind on work, they can go. If the student has trouble focusing in class, they can go. But it's also the place if you've messed up and it's usually for violence. We don't want you out with everybody because you got in a fight, but we also don't want to send you home to eat the Cheetos on the couch. I think that would really, really be a huge support if we could get the state to fund those for every high school.
Okay, I want to just take you back in history real quick. In 2011, I walked into Pelahatchie Elementary School. I was fired up, and I wanted to do all the right things. And my mentor principal gave me a gift, and I unwrapped it, and it was a paddle. And it had 4 holes across the side, and it was about 10 holes deep, and it was about that long, and it whistled when I swung it. Because in most of Mississippi at that time, paddling was okay, and about 100% of our families were marked on the emergency card, we want you to paddle instead of suspend. And I think that kind of goes to some of that. So this is a long time ago, 15 years ago. The next year, someone paddled too hard, bruised a kid up, and we got sued, and all the paddles came out. And when I walked into that school, every teacher had a paddle. Yeah.
Oh.
And they spent a lot of time out in the hallways threatening kids with paddles and then carrying through. And so the first year we got rid of paddles was, that was a hard year because some of the families were like, I want you to wear him out, and just, or I'm going to come up there. And they'd come out to the tree across from the school, snap a green branch off, test it to make sure it was green and bent, and then they would take them to the car and spank them. So it was a culture thing.
Yes.
But over the years, that changed in Mississippi, and we got less hard-hearted and realized more that the error of our ways. And I quit paddling after a year. I really didn't want to paddle. I didn't paddle my own kids. Flash forward to Culture of Care days. I do think that is super important that we remember, especially in the hard moments where kids do something egregious. That zero tolerance is different from throwing children away. Where are you going to put them? They're still there. Mm-hmm. They're still going to be, if you just throw a child away, they're going to be a problem socially that we're all going to share the cost of. So I think in whatever way our state does it or other states do it, the best thing to do is reteach, reaffirm, get them reintegrated. I'll finish with a quick story. In Mississippi, we have alternative schools, or what we call learning centers now, rebranded. And the whole focus of that is when a child has exceeded all the things you can do at a school, they go there, and the focus is more on behavior teaching and less on academics, because that's what they really, really need so that they can access academics. And in my last year in Mississippi, we had a student who had exceeded all the things, and I, with a lot of care and thoughtfulness with the team that was working with the student, he went to the behavior center. We were required in my district every 45 days to check on that child. So I'd bring him McDonald's. We'd sit and have McDonald's, and he hated my guts for a long time. And then about halfway through that time, he started changing. Yeah. And he started realizing some of the things that he could do to help himself. I kept visiting him. And then sooner or later, it was time for him to come back. He was 2 years behind in school. He was almost 13 in 6th grade. Think about that. That's hard. That's hard for a lot of reasons. Legally, that's hard. When he came back to us, the teachers welcomed him. He grew like crazy because he was ready. And I just want to end on that it's important to remember that no matter what they do, outside of some serious things that are like, we
There's
can
a
all
line.
kind of extrapolate that in your head, but we
There's a
can't throw
line.
them away. There's nowhere to throw them away. We've got to make sure that they get something out of this situation and try to improve.
That is a beautiful place, and thank you so much. We could continue this conversation for a long time, and actually that's our hope with Changemakers here, right? Is that all of us will go forward and continue this conversation. But we do have to wrap today, so I've asked you to please give a round of applause and thanks to everyone. I want to invite my Changemakers colleague, Jade, up here. One of our chairs will start the change committee and to get some closing thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you all. My name is Jade Changemaker Alumni, also the co-chair of our speakers series. This is amazing. What a rare opportunity to hear from distinguished school leaders in New Mexico. I heard three things today. I heard importance on consistency. I heard importance about urgency and urgent leadership. And then most importantly, change takes time, but change is possible. And I think I'm walking away with a lot of that today. So thank you again for our panelists. One more round of applause for them. As I mentioned, this is our third speaker series, and as we say at the beginning of each panel, this is not about having all the right answers today. It's about getting curious together and pursuing the right questions. The data shows where we are, and also shows that progress is ultimately very possible. A couple of big thank yous for those who made today's event possible. I want to name them by name, of course. MIMOGA, Mexico Oil and Gas Association, round of applause for them for giving us some generous resources today. And the folks in our full planning committee, Gloria, Amanda, Dominica, Michael, Veronica, and Jade for all the support and logistics that made today happen. As we wrap, we invite you to stay engaged. We are committed to making major positive changes happen here in Mexico. And you're even at those you are too. So a couple of things we encourage you to do moving forward. One, follow Changemakers on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. If you're interested in getting involved on a committee or want to continue in the work alongside us, come talk to one of us after our panel. Of course, on behalf of the entire Changemakers Alumni, we wanted to thank our panel members one more time for being here to share their wisdom with us. And we want to thank you all for being here, for caring, for investing, and for helping us to carry this effort forward and make real improvements for our kids and for our state. So thank you, and we'll see you at our next speakers. Oh, and Amanda wants to remind everybody there is more food because there's really cool spread back there. So thank you all so much. Have a good day.